guys, welcome back to Believe in Eagles. I am your host, Leigh Mayock, and this podcast is brought to you by Bet Online. We're in March Madness right now. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness. I'm a little hesitant to get into March Madness because I'm afraid anything can happen, and I don't like an anything can happen situation when I'm betting with my own money. So I'm sticking with the NBA because that's what I seem to know best. The Lakers play tonight. They're without LeBron James. Luka just gets the ball so much, and you can count on him for a nice handful of turnovers. When you're scoring that many points and dishing that many assists, you tend to get some turnovers. Austin Reeves, he's back from injury too. He's been kind of slow to start the last two games, but again, with LeBron James out, I think that you can look to him for a handful, like a sneaky 20 points or so. So that's what I'm going to roll with. But Bet Online, your number one source for all things March Madness and everything in between. Welcome back, Dad. Great to have you. Mike Mayock here, everyone. Don't worry. He has everything you want to know about free agency. Dad, the Eagles fans are freaking out because Howie's been a little quiet since he re-signed Saquon and Zach Vaughn. Your immediate message to Eagles fans, should they calm down? Is everything okay?
It's the same thing Howie basically said, which is, patience. Mm-hmm. That's the key word right now. And, before we get into the Eagles, don't forget that your cousin Matthew just punched his ticket to the dance, the March Madness dance last night, American University basketball.
I know. Are we allowed to bet on that?
I don't know I'm not betting because I just won't, but.
Yeah, shout out Matt Mayock over at American University. Oh my gosh, what if they're the Cinderella story this year? That'd be so fun.
I mean, I think it's kind of cool. Your cousin's playing in the tournament. He had 9 last night. I think he shot 4 for 5, had a really good floor game. He's a sophomore. And so while you're looking at your betting lines, you might have to look at, and they might have a play-in. They do that first 4. I looked at the CBS bracketology right before we came online, and they might have a play-in game against St. Francis of Pennsylvania, which is the college that fired your Uncle Pete as his head football coach years ago. And, of course, the Mayocks still hate St. Francis. So if it's AU versus St. Francis, you know which side we're going.
Yes, that's 8 degrees of Mayock madness right there. Wait, that's exciting. Yeah. Okay. I can't wait to watch.
Yep.
And I would always bet on little Matt Mayock for a lot of 3 balls.
He can shoot.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Howie Roseman in free agency. You didn't expect him to do much?
Given where they were with the talent level on their team, and the amount of cap space and cap money available by some of those other teams, there were a couple teams with plus or minus $100 million in salary cap dollars to spend. One of them, which was New England, which swooped in and got Milt Williams. And he was the guy I was really hoping.
I know. I thought of you immediately.
Yeah, I thought they'd lose Sweat. But I was hoping they could find a way to keep Milt because he's 25 and about to become really dominant. But money talks. New England paid him. Josh Sweat is gone. They've lost 5 or 6 starters on the defensive side. And but here's what I would tell Eagle fans. Number 1, trust Howie. Mm-hmm. Number 2, they've drafted so well that amongst the key losses, they also have young guys that they've drafted over the last 2 or 3 years that can step in. I mean, with Milt Williams, keep in mind, they're going to have to pay Jalen Carter in the next year or 2. And if he plays next year like he did last year, he's going to be the top defensive tackle in the NFL. Jordan Davis, if they want to keep him, they're going to have to pay him in the next year or 2. And they've got some good defensive tackle depth. Jomo is a kid that's played well. So they've got some quality depth there. Defensive end, that kid, Jalix Hunt, who they took in the 3rd round, came on at the end of last year. So the loss of Sweat, you've got Jalix Hunt, a young guy. I don't know whether or not Bryce Huff is ever going to be anything, but they paid him a lot of money. He's only 26 years old. There's some depth there. right? They lost two corners, Darius Slay, but he's 34 years old. Isaiah Rodgers was kind of the do everything backup. They lost both of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's an area where I think you'll see Howie deal with something in the draft and or a trade. The question I have is whether or not Cooper DeJean is going to stay in the slot or whether they try to kick him outside.
What would you suggest they do? What do you think smarter for them?
I like them inside. They have two long, talented young corners. Keely Ringo, fourth-round pick out of Georgia. Eli Ricks, a free agent. College, both young. It'll be interesting to see what kind of moves Howie does or doesn't make, and it'll tell you how confident or not they feel in those two kids. You know, they're both like 23, 24, and there's some talent there. So I think that's interesting. I thought the C.J. Gardner-Johnson trade was really intriguing. So you trade a starting safety for a guard from Houston. And this guard, Lee, was a former first-round pick, Kenyon Green.
Yes, I've heard he's a young guard that has been somewhat, I don't want to use the word disappointment, but hasn't lived up to his potential yet. And that sparked something in my brain, like under Jeff Stoutland, how different do you think that could be? And do you think that's why they saw a spark there?
It triggers a bunch of things in my mind, which is typical Howie. One is Mekhi Becton hasn't signed anywhere yet, right? If they could sign Mekhi Becton back, keep in mind that he came out of college as a tackle, and he's a really good fit for if and when Lane Johnson retires, who's 35. You know, Lane says he's playing next year. He's still playing at a high level. But if they could keep Mekhi and bring Kenyon Green into the fold, they've got maximum flexibility with your guy Stoutland, because I think Becton could start outside. I think Kenyon Green, I watched his tape coming out of Texas A&M. He's a gifted kid. To your point, he has been a disappointment. And it's been a combination of play and injury. He got hurt last year. I saw his tape. I did a Houston game. It wasn't great. But he's got a lot of talent. And Jeff Stoutland is great at bringing latent talent to fruition. So that's one I'm keeping an eye on. I think that's kind of a sneaky cool. Now, it opens up, well, what about CJ? But don't forget, they've got the third-round pick from 23, Sidney Brown, who was hurt a lot of last year. And again, my point is the Eagles have drafted so well. They've got a lot of young guys ready to step in for the departed guys. And now you got to trust that Howie's going to deal with the draft and potential trades going forward.
So you're saying that, so a lot of people assumed with the C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Kenyon Green trade that Mekhi Becton was we were losing him too. You don't think that is necessarily the case?
I think they probably will lose him because I don't know if they can afford him. If I was Mekhi Becton, remember, another former first-round pick by the Jets, really talented. Stout kind of resurrected his career. If I was Becton, I would be looking for a fair deal from the Eagles and continue to develop under Stout, because ultimately he's going to make more money and win more championships if he becomes a better player here in Philadelphia. And I think Stout and the Eagles' infrastructure can help him become the best player he can become. Now, having said all that, I still think he's probably going to leave for the big money. Okay. But if they could keep him and they have Kenyon Green, I think it gives them ultimate flexibility in the offensive line.
Okay. And then, so we talked about Kenyon Green. We also signed A.J. Dillon.
Yep.
What do you think about that move?
Well, you know where he went to college, so you know what I think about that move.
Is it Boston College, the hat that you wear on this podcast every time?
Yeah, he was a second-round pick by the Packers. He's a big, strong, tough running back. Now, he missed most, if not all, of last year. He had a neck injury in 23. He was on IR last year. But he was a second-round pick, Lee. Big, strong, fast, good backup for Saquon. And keep in mind, they've got the kid from Clemson, Will Shipley, who came on at the end of last year also.
Okay, and then there was also, who else was there? Dorian Thompson-Robinson. What about that?
I did the Browns game late in the year against Baltimore when he started. I mean, he's an athletic guy, similar to a lower level Jalen in that he's an athlete. He can do the RPO game.
Okay.
He's struggling as a quarterback. I think that might have been more about Cleveland needing to clear a quarterback out of the quarterback room and gain a little cap space.
Okay.
Let's face it, Tanner McKee right now is the Eagles' backup quarterback, and I think it's just handy to have DTR around.
Okay, that makes sense now. I was confused by that one. Now back to kind of like the defensive back situation. Are there any of those guys in the draft that you see as maybe, someone that the Eagles defense would pounce on?
There's a guy from Florida State named Azariah Thomas who's a corner who I like more than most people. I think he's a first-round pick all day long.
Okay.
A lot of people think he's going to go mid to late two. He's a long, talented corner, tackles, competes on the edge, not afraid to be on an island. If he was sitting there at 32, the Eagles didn't move up or back or anywhere, and he'd be a guy I'd be really interested in.
Do you think they'll do any movement regarding their picks?
They have 8 picks right now, including 4 in the 5th round. And knowing Howie, the 4 in the 5th round give him a little bit of flexibility to move up or back.
Okay.
And I just think he doesn't know what he's going to do yet. He's still formulating his draft philosophy for this year. He's going to look at when free agency kind of clears. He'll be looking around at logical trades. He'll be looking at team. What Howie does better than any GM in the league is he touches base verbally with all 31 teams. Like, he'll just call you out of the blue and say, "Hey, Mike, what's going on? You got
Does not
anybody?"
every GM really do that?
Not to the level he does. And he'll be like, "You got anybody you want to talk about? You got anybody on our team you're interested in? Anything interesting you're hearing out?" Like, he's got his finger on the pulse, and it's him personally, which I think is really cool.
Were you like that?
Probably should have been better. Maybe I'd still be there. But no, I like knowing what was going on, and I talk to people, but Howie's really good at it.
Just speaking real quick, Raiders, as you're no longer there, but they made a big move. They have Geno Smith as their new quarterback under former coach Pete Carroll. What do you think about that?
I think it gives Pete a degree of confidence because he knows Geno so well. Geno's 35. He's making $31 million. He wants to make more. It'll be interesting to see if the Raiders pay him more because they're drafting at number 6 overall. They only gave up a 3rd-round pick for Geno. The way I look at this is it does not take them out of the quarterback business. I think Geno is a bridge, a solid bridge, but a bridge. He's 35. It gives the Raiders a chance to compete now with a solid quarterback, an upgrade over what they had in the building. They had a lot of money to spend. It was interesting for me personally because 4 of the guys we picked in 21 who became really good football players got paid. And I think, the Raiders had talked about trying to re-sign all of them, but they weren't able to. Malcolm Kuntz re-signed, which I think was a key move for the Raiders. But they lost Nate Hobbs to Green Bay. Trayvon Merrick, who's become a heck of a player, out of the building. They had to sign Jeremy Chin, who I don't think is quite the level. So it was interesting for me just to see 4 guys that we drafted in 21 turn into really good football players and get paid. And now the Raiders have to kind of backfill there a little bit. And they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I think they're doing a nice job.
Yeah, I do too. I thought it was a smart way, like you said, to make them competitors now instead of potentially having to wait for to draft a new young star quarterback and just fingers crossed hope for the best.
Yeah, it buys them time, and it's a little bit similar to the kind of quote dark car philosophy. There are maybe 6 or 7 franchise quarterbacks in the league, and then below that, there's 8, 10, 12 guys that are good football players that you could win with, but they can't win by themselves. And Dirk was a really good quarterback, and I think Geno Smith is a really good quarterback. Geno's won 8 to 10 games in the last 3 years with Seattle. And so if you're Vegas, he gives you an opportunity to step in day one and compete as long as you're filling in around them.
You mentioned Jeremy Chin, and Eagles fans are probably familiar with that name as he is from the Commanders in our own division. They have been making pretty big moves, and the moves are a little better than I would like as an Eagles fan. What do you think about the things that they've been doing in this free agency?
Beware Washington. Like they're Adam Peters is their GM. I think one of the smartest young guys I've met in that league. He worked with John Lynch in San Francisco. He was in Denver before that. Really smart. You team him with Dan Quinn, you got two really smart guys that are tied together, and they don't care about anything but building, and they are building. And so when you take Jaden Daniels, who's the best young quarterback in football right now, and they went to the NFC Championship game out of nowhere a year ago. And so what have they done? Well, they traded for Deebo Samuel. 5th round pick. They absorbed some salary. But who's the guy that drafted Deebo in San Francisco? Adam Peters and John Lynch. So nobody knows Deebo, and I think you're going to have a pissed off Deebo, which is bad news for the NFC East.
Yes.
I think he'll be in shape, ready to go. He's only 28 or 9. If he's healthy, watch out. And then the real key move was the trade for Laramie Tunsil, who's a 31-year-old tackle who's still in the top 5 best left tackles in the NFL. That was a key move for them. They needed to get better up front because that quarterback covered up for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So they trade Tunsil. They trade for Deebo. They signed both tight ends, which is a big deal. Zach Ertz, a former Eagle, he was kind of the security blanket for that quarterback. He had a big year. They signed John Bates, their other tight end. And on defense, keep in mind, Dan Quinn's a defensive-minded head coach. I mean, they signed 2 defensive tackles, Kinlaw and Eddie Goldman, 2 guys from the Patriots that can still play. They do a lot of one-year veteran deals. They did it last year. They're doing it again this year. And so if I was an Eagle fan, I'd be going, Dallas is pretty good. They are who they're going to be. The Giants are struggling. But watch out. Washington is just getting better and better.
I know. I kept seeing their moves, and I was like, oh, another one? Yep. They signed Marcus Mariota, too, and isn't right? And you know him well. He was on one of your teams, right?
Yeah, he was with us with the Raiders. And if you define what a really high-level backup quarterback looks like at this point, Marcus Mariota's there, and you can win games with him. Yeah. He's smart, he's tough, and the players love playing for him.
And then really quick, just speaking of quarterbacks, the 2 big question marks now, like nationally, are still Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
I almost said Russell Westbrook. I got sports betting on my mind.
Yeah.
I bet his rebounds last night. But, okay, so Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, most people are saying Aaron Rodgers is in between the Giants and potentially the Vikings, maybe the Steelers, and then almost same kind of rotation with Russell Wilson, but add in the Browns too. So what do you see going on with both of those?
So what's happened, Leigh, and it's kind of exactly what I thought, which is at the quarterback position, youth was served first amongst the available. In other words, Sam Darnold, bang. He became Seattle's guy after they moved Geno. Justin Fields, bang, he's gone. Daniel Jones, even though people don't, they were the first 3 quarterbacks to go, and they're all in their 20s. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then you get to the bridge guys, and they're the 2, that you're talking about. And even though Aaron Rodgers and probably Russell Wilson are both Hall of Fame guys, Aaron's 41, and it looks like he and Pittsburgh are looking like it might be a marriage. If I'm Aaron Rodgers, it's probably got to be Pittsburgh because A, I want to start, and I'm not sure he would start in Minnesota, and B, I want to play 2 years if I can, and I want to play in the playoffs. Okay, I don't think the Giants are there. I think J.J. McCarthy's the guy Minnesota wants to start, last year's first-round pick. So to me, I'm surprised that Pittsburgh and Aaron Rodgers have not come to an agreement already. That's point number one. And once that domino falls, then the Russell Wilson thing will come in. He's visiting, I think, Cleveland. I think he's visiting with the Giants, I forget.
Yeah.
But
Giants.
he'll be the next domino to fall, I believe. But I would imagine you're going to hear news sometime really soon today that Aaron Rodgers signs with Pittsburgh.
Okay. And you think that is also the most advantageous thing for himself, given Mike Tomlin just got DK Metcalf to pair with George Pickens, and they're kind of restructuring over there too?
I don't think they're a Super Bowl roster, but I think they're under Mike Tomlin, they're always a playoff team. And people are frustrated that it's 9-8, 10-7. Aaron Rodgers struggled again last year a little bit coming off that Achilles, but he gives them a chance to get the ball to those two guys, big-bodied, fast, strong, DK and Pickens. And the other thing that I like about it is that Pickens is a little bit of a problem. He's a diva, some off-the-field stuff, some on-the-field stuff. So how do you control that? Tomlin's pretty good at it.
He's the bad locker room whisperer, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, we took Antonio off his plate for him, and then Deontay Johnson, another guy they moved on from. Pickens there's been a lot of rumors about moving on from Pickens. So my point I'm trying to make is that Aaron Rodgers brings some cachet into that locker room. You're a Hall of Fame 41-year-old dude, and you're George Pickens. You better listen up. And the other thing is, George Pickens knows that if he wants to get the ball, Aaron Rodgers can get it to him. He still threw the ball down the field well last year. I think he can drive it. He knows when one-on-one opportunities are there. So if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'd look at that situation and say, if I want to play in the playoffs for the next year or two, this is probably the only situation left that I can help them be better and help us progress in the playoffs.
Okay. And then you think, let's just assume for now that happens. Do you think Russell Wilson's a better fit in New York or with the Giants or the Browns? And do you think he thinks that he's coming in and starting, or some type of combination, or what?
I'm sure he wants to start. School is still out because the first three teams drafting in this year's draft all need quarterbacks. I mean, Tennessee needs a quarterback at 1. Cleveland, even though they traded for Pickett, they need a quarterback at 2. And the Giants need a quarterback at 3. So regardless of which team Russell signs with, there's a real chance that Cleveland or the Giants could draft a quarterback at 2 or 3. So at this point in his career, to me, he's a guy that can start and he can help you, but he's not going to drive you towards a big season. He can take care of the football. He knows what he's doing. He can be competent. He can be a good bridge, but all these teams are going to be looking for young quarterbacks.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Dad, for that little free agency frenzy roundup. And to tie it all together, I think we can just say, Eagles fans, keep calm and trust in Howie. Is that what you'd say too?
Exactly what I would say.
Not trust the process, because the Sixers are scary bad right now. Trust in Howie.
I would trust in Howie. I would trust in their coaching staff, and they do a great job bringing people into their building and then developing them.
All right, cool. Well, we'll look forward to it. Thank you so much for being here, and we will chat next week. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Eddie.